Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday, and welcome into our final FreightWaves Now of the year. Regular one, at least. We got a special show on tap for tomorrow. I'm Kaylee Nix. Here with me is Anthony Smith.
Yeah, and I'm excited for this show, and tomorrow's going to be a blast. But this morning, we are going to have an amazing show. We have our very own Scott Berhang on in just a moment to talk about fuel buying in 2023. And we'll also have our mailbag segment coming up, predicting what will happen in 2023. But first, our top story takes us back to California and the Prop 22 debate as it relates to AB5. John Kingston has been covering the story, and he joins us now. John, thanks so much for being here this morning.
How you doing, Anthony? And how are you doing, Kaylee? It's been a fun year.
Been a fun year. AB5, Prop 22, all of that has been kind of dramatic. And now we've got Prop 22 back in court to have its day. What's going on with that legislation?
Well, let's first recap everything that's happened, of course. So AB5 is the law on regulating independent contractors in California. It passed the legislature and was signed by the governor in 2019. On the ballot, under the initiative process of California, which is a very powerful initiative process in that state, in 2020, the voters fairly overwhelmingly voted to exempt gig drivers like Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, DoorDash drivers from from AB5. And this is particularly notable because it was primarily gig drivers that were the target of AB5, that and trucking. So the supporters of Prop 22 went to court, and a county court, and an Alameda County court judge ruled that Prop 22 was unconstitutional, and ruled it because it said it was in violation of the state's workers' compensation clause. I shouldn't say clause, laws. So the backers of Prop 22 took that to court. That now finally had its day in court last week. That's like more than a year and a half after the original ruling. The arguments at this case, at this point, are all legalist. They're all very legal arguments. They're not whether AB5 is a good rule. They're not whether gig drivers are good people. None of that stuff. It's all strictly a legal battle over whether Prop 22, in fact, did overreach. The argument in favor of overturning the county court judge is that the initiative right in the state of California is really all powerful as the legislature, and that the judge was wrong in overturning the will of the people. The counter argument in favor of what the judge did is that, yes, the initiative power is very powerful, but it is not all powerful, and that there were provisions in Prop 22 dealing first with workers' compensation and also with the right to organize for collective bargaining that were in violation of the state's constitution. There are also legal arguments regarding how you can change the provisions of Prop 22, that this was like unprecedented what the rules they made. So, I mean, you can go back, if you look at the story I published yesterday, there is a link in there to the proceedings in the appellate court. And I will warn you right now, it is very much a legal thing. If you're going in there to hear about gig workers and their value to America, you're not going to hear it. You're going to hear very strict legal arguments.
And John, as we see this development now, where does this place gig workers within California? Does this move them a little bit closer or further away from where they want to be?
Well, when the county court judge overturned Prop 22, he did stay it. So the Prop 22 block on gig workers falling under AB5 that went into effect with the vote in Prop 22 remains in effect. I did see one reference that they expect a decision in 90 days. After that, I would imagine it would get appealed to the California Supreme Court, regardless of what the decision is. I would imagine the stay would stay in place for that. As I told you, it already was like a year and a half from the lower court decision to the appellate court decision. I don't know how long it's going to be before it shows up in California Supreme Court. And then, we're right back to the whole AB5 thing. Maybe the losing side seeks certiorari from the U.S. Supreme Court, and that could take a long time too. So this still may take a long time to play out. It's quite a case. The whole AB5 Prop 22 nexus is providing rich lawyers with lots of work and poor journalists like myself with things to write about.
And so that's exactly the next question, right? Is that nothing truly happens with this until someone decides to take someone to court over whether they're not or they are or not in compliance with it, right? It's that same kind of story with the AB5 legislation. It's not like there are these like people coming in to audit your company saying you're in compliance or you're not compliant. It's all that legal battle. Have we seen any of that actually happen yet, where someone's been taken to court over the case and saying, hey, you're violating these rules, now let's see those consequences?
Well, you wouldn't see it yet in Prop 22 because it is stayed. In AB5, I do think that there are no stories of that, but I cannot imagine the state regulators now, given the power under AB5, are just sitting back. They are, I'm quite sure, preparing some cases right now against certain companies. I'm sure they are fielding complaints and tips, whatever, from truck drivers who feel that they've been treated like employees but are legally independent contractors. And in some ways, this is good for the trucking industry. AB5 is not completely prescriptive. It doesn't say that you can do A, B, C, D, and E, but you can't do F, G, H, I, and J. You're going to need a body of law to help trucking companies know what they can and cannot do. Now, the problem is that there's going to be a few poor guinea pigs out there who are going to be the ones that get prosecuted or sued or whatever by the state, and the resolution of their cases will presumably establish that body of law, which people will then, truckers will have, trucking companies will have a better idea of what they can and cannot do. Those guinea pigs have yet to be identified. I'm quite sure the state regulators have a pretty good beat on who they're going to be, and it would not surprise me if in the first few months of 2023, we get some kind of a case of the state going against trucking company, Acme. I shouldn't say Acme Trucking Company. There's probably somebody out there called Acme Company. So, trucking company ABC in California, and that'll have to get litigated out, and however it's resolved will help to establish the body of law that lawyers will be able to draw from in trying to defend their clients and trying to really protect their clients in what they need to do in regards to the classification of their workers.
And John, speaking of guinea pigs, is there any precedent for anything like this that we can follow a similar framework for, so we can kind of have some idea of how it would turn out, or is this all new territory altogether?
It's a tough question. I would say that I would really need to be, again, remember, it's, as I mentioned, the arguments that were in court were all very legalistic. They really did not deal with gig drivers per se. So you would really, I read a lot of the briefs and I listened to the arguments, and there were references to a whole variety of previous cases regarding the state's power of initiative. So it is fairly, as I said, it's a fairly strong power. It does not appear to be all encompassing and all sweeping, and that's really what the appellate court is going to have to figure out. So whatever decision they come down on is not really a gig worker or a truck driver decision per se. It's very much adding to the previous legacy of earlier decisions regarding the power of California's initiative.
Totally understandable. It's going to be interesting to watch going forward in 2023. John, I'm going to pivot questions or pivot topics with you really quickly to diesel and get your thoughts on this. We saw the DOE price come out Monday, as you wrote about yesterday in the news, and we're now starting to see retail prices creep closer to wholesale prices, right? Closing that spread a little bit. Give us a quick little overview about the diesel market right now.
Yeah, so the diesel market has actually kind of gotten boring in the last week. It's been relatively steady, but yeah, you're right. So, in Sonar, we have the fuels.usa data series. It shows a very simple spread between the average retail price and the average wholesale price. I would say normalcy in that spread is about $1 to $1.10. As of a couple of weeks ago, it got up to $2. And really the reason is when markets are as crazy as they are, and really believe me, historically, this is a nutty diesel market. In going through the numbers, I have a tough time finding anything like this. Retailers are just not set up to react that fast to declines or even increases in wholesale prices and wholesale prices and futures prices. So with those prices having plummeted over the last couple of weeks, retail is sort of coming down at its own relatively steady pace. It's not even that steady. I mean, the declines over the past few weeks in that DOE number, I think it's well over 40 cents in 3 weeks, which is a lot. So it is now catching up to these big declines in the wholesale and futures markets of the prior weeks. The other thing I want to point out, it's the heating oil market. the diesel market is tied to the heating oil market, which in turn is tied to natural gas, which of course is tied to the weather. And while there's all these reports of a really serious blast of cold weather this weekend throughout much of the country, the fact is by the end of next week, it's supposed to be fairly moderate. And the heating oil market and the diesel market have already taken that into consideration. And prices have been declining these past few days, which is kind of very strange given the current weather forecast for the next few days. So diesel's kind of calmed down, but retail obviously has a way to go to catch up with those earlier drops.
And John, if people want to catch more of your insights and get more of your content, how can they do that?
J. Kingston at FreightWaves.com. Please send me a message. I'm John H. Kingston on Twitter, and Drilling Deep drops every Friday. This week, of course, it'll be Thursday, and this week I've got, who do I have this week? Oh, Dave Heller from the Truckload Carriers Association talking about Washington issues regarding trucking in 2023.
All right, John, well, thank you so much for joining us this morning and all of 2022. We will catch up with you in the new year.
Yes, you too.
All right, we're going to head on over to the wall. We've got our first carrier update of the morning.
Welcome into this carrier update, Donnie. Going to start here looking at the ocean market. We've got Container Atlas, that ocean TEU volume index.
You call it the ocean market. I call it trucking 45 to 65 days in advance. How about that?
Yeah.
But yeah, so looking at our ocean TEU volumes, of course, we've seen the fall off, back here in the springtime, early, February we saw it drop down, then again here, April, May-ish, and then of course it's been kind of slowly trending down. Mm-hmm. And this was the indications of what we're seeing now.
Yep.
We are an import nation. If imports start to fall off because shippers here aren't ordering more products to make their products, that means we're seeing some type of slowdown somewhere. Mm-hmm. And the best place to see it is in really the next chart, which is the bookings, but we're going to look at the ocean index and the bookings as well, and to see when those start to slow down, it's an indicator that we're going to slow down. And this can be, like I say, 30 or 35, 45 to 65, almost 90 days in advance, mm-hmm. because of, the bookings are maybe 10 days before it gets on the boat.
Yep.
The boat could be anywhere from 25 to 45 days. Then you got to go through customs. Then it might go on the train. Mm-hmm. Then it might go to warehousing, and then it might come out into the market on a truck. One way or another, it's going to go by truck eventually, but how does it travel first? Yeah. So this is a good indicator. Now, what I like to see here is, here we saw a bump here at the end of the month of November, which we should see those volumes coming in right now. And we see another little bump coming in here. It's not a big bump, but it's something. Mm-hmm. And it leads me into what I'm going to look at here in about 2 more charts. But let's go to the next chart here and look at bookings. Bookings, they still kind of go down. You see a little bit of a bump here, but they're already going down. So overall, we don't see any kind of increases. But you said something the other day that really kind of peeked out at me about our shippers reverting back to the West Coast. Well, if we really don't see volumes picking up in bookings, really don't see volumes picking up in the TEUs, let's go to the next chart here. Port of Los Angeles. We see these 2 spikes. Mm-hmm. What's going on? I mean, this is just one port where I was looking at everything coming into the United States, East Coast, West Coast, everything combined, no real big indications of anything pushing up, but now we're starting to see some volumes push back up on the West Coast.
Yeah.
Primarily Los Angeles. Now, if volumes aren't picking up, it very well could be that here in about another 30 days or over the next 30 days, in early February, we might see some volumes picking up. They may not care where they ship into, and this might be their cheapest option right now.
Yeah, exactly. Cheapest option, no congestion, right? They already have the infrastructure built out on the West Coast. It's not a surprise to see this kind of trending upward where you see it start to be impacted other ports for, hey, we're down double digits.
When we come back, Tony, we're going to look at 2 other ports and see if we see this happen in those ports, and they're on the East Coast.
Awesome stuff, Donnie. Thank you so much for this update. Right now, we'll toss it over to Sydney Edwards.
With a first check of our headlines for the day, I'm Sydney Edwards. Now, cargo airlines are showing more interest in investing in omnichannels to simplify the process for reserving cargo space. Those investments include software tools that allow for back-end systems to automatically communicate with customer applications and multi-party platforms that sell air cargo capacity. More airlines are also providing their space on multiple platforms, offering shippers the opportunity to shop around for pricing. Platforms like Cargo.one have partnered with Lufthansa Cargo for both investment and for carrier participation. And CEO Teddy Zebitz said he expects the majority of air customers to be booking digitally in only a few years' time. The Environmental Protection Agency has issued a final rule on its heavy-duty truck tailpipe emissions, and the response has been mixed. Engine manufacturers and trucking organizations say that compliance will be difficult going forward. The EPA chose a one-step emission change for nitrous oxide emissions, with enforcement starting in 2027. The new standards will be 80% stronger than rules released last year and increase the useful life of vehicles by 1.5 to 2.5 times. And both Port Houston and Corpus Christi saw increased volumes in November, mostly thanks to strong imports of autos and auto parts and strong exports of U.S. petroleum and crude oil. Port Houston reached 3.6 million TEUs for the year in November, with monthly imports up 11% year over year. This was the fourth highest year ever for containers at the port, and yearly volume is up 17% since January. Officials say steel imports are slowing, while auto imports are soaring. Steel was down 21% year over year in November compared to 2021, and auto imports were up 141% year over year. Now you can find details on these stories and so much more happening at FreightWaves.com and on our FreightWaves app. And if you're watching us live on our YouTube channel, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated. You can get the full FreightWaves TV experience by heading on over to tv.freightwaves.com. After the break, we've got a first look at weather and we've got Social Roundabout. Stay tuned.
The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
What does this have to do with freight? Well, I'm glad you asked. People are wondering what's going to happen with inflation. Is there going to be hyperinflation? When is hyperinflation going to be here? When is there going to be inflation? What's going to happen with inflation? Inflation, inflation, inflation. This is the sexiest topic within the economy right now.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now on this Wednesday. It's time for our first check of the weather. We're watching this pretty strong winter storm really start to ramp up across the northern parts of the plains as we get ready for a very difficult weekend of travel ahead of your Christmas holiday. Let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events right now. We've got that radar up, and we've already got some really heavy snowfall falling pretty much everywhere from the Dakotas westward into the northern parts of Montana, Idaho, Washington, and Oregon. And because of that, we do have winter storm warnings, blizzard warnings, wind chill warnings, you name it, we've got it up right now. So blizzard warnings are going to be in that southwestern corner of Minnesota right now. No major interstates really impacted from this, but this is just outside of the Bloomington area. We've got some really heavy snowfall setting up right there in that southwestern corner. And this is going to cause visibility issues where we will see zero visibility out of this. So driving conditions will be difficult, if not impossible. Further out towards the west, that heavy snowfall coming into the mountains of Wyoming right now, those western mountains, sitting in southeastern Montana. So that's going to be Interstate 90 that's affected from that, 94, as well as those interstates moving through Wyoming. Again, travel difficult, if not impossible for today for these states. What we're going to be watching for tomorrow on into Friday is as this cold air and this moisture continues to push down to the south-southeast, that cold air that's already in place is just going to find enough energy to really ramp up that snowfall production. So we could be seeing some really heavy snow all the way from northwestern and northeastern Kansas up into the Great Lakes areas. Because of that, winter storm watch is already in place. Same thing with winter storm warnings further up into Iowa and Wisconsin. And it's just going to be a mess out there for the next few days. Other than that, following the actual winter precipitation, we are going to see some really cold air make its way down to the southeast into today, tonight, and into tomorrow. Some places going to be seeing high temperatures in the negative 30s to negative 40s in some of those coldest places. We'll talk a little bit more about weather coming up later on in the show. Right now, we're going to toss things over to Isaiah Buchanan.
Welcome into Social Roundabout, everyone. I'm Isaiah Buchanan, and we had a very scary moment just about 20 minutes away from us here at HQ in Freight Alley in Chattanooga, Tennessee. There was a train that hit a truck carrying a 60-foot piece of concrete. It was actually a piece of concrete that was going to be for a bridge for another construction project just a little ways away. But take a look at this video. I'm going to warn you, it is pretty graphic. So that truck was trying to cross the tracks and unfortunately just could not get across in time. It hit that 60-foot concrete barrier that was going to be a bridge beam for a construction project. 3 locomotives and 10 boxcars were derailed, and large amounts of diesel fuel were spilled all across this area. Luckily, a Hamilton County spokesperson says that only 2 people were hurt, but they have minor injuries. They are okay. So glad that nobody else was hurt. The situation really could have been a lot worse. I mean, just look at these photos of the damage. So just really happy that everybody, for the most part, is doing fine out of that project or out of that crash. Now, switching things up a little bit, Monday, I showed you a poll that Elon Musk put on his Twitter page saying that he would asking if he should step down as Twitter CEO and that he would abide by the results of that poll. Now take a look at this from his Twitter page. The results show that 57.5% of people believe that yes, he should step down as the Twitter CEO. And he responded to the poll saying, "I will resign as CEO as soon as I find someone foolish enough to take the job. After that, I will just run the software and servers teams." Elon has also said that no one wants the job who can actually keep Twitter alive. That's all I have for this edition of Social Roundabout, but right now I'm going to toss things back over to Kaylee and Anthony.
All right, Isaiah, thank you for that. Anthony, rumor has it you've got a hot take about the Twitter situation.
Yeah, I think keep Elon in charge. I like the chaos.
Agent of chaos here, Anthony Smith. Forget lead economist. You are now lead agent of chaos.
Chief chaos in charge.
That's chief chaos to you. All right, Anthony, thanks for that. We're going to catch up with Isaiah in just a few minutes once again. Right now, we're going to welcome in our next live guest. We've got Scott Berhang with us, who is, of course, our host of Refuel and our fuel buying expert here at FreightWaves. Scott, thank you for being here on this Wednesday.
It's my pleasure. I'm still getting over that clip from the truck and the train. Oh my gosh.
Crazy stuff here in Chattanooga yesterday.
Yeah, that could be like a metaphor for Christmas with my in-laws.
Funny stuff there, Scott. Well, thank you for being here on the show. We, of course, saw a very interesting and very volatile fuel market this year. Everything from the conflict in Ukraine really driving up diesel prices to folks saying, you know what, I got to park my truck because fuel prices are just simply too high. Talk to us a little bit about what you saw this year and how it's kind of affected the markets.
Well, you know, it's interesting because this was a year of tremendous and underlying tremendous volatility in fuel prices, right? So we've had some periods of time where prices were relatively stagnant, kind of flat. What we saw this year has just been a tremendous seesawing up and down and up and down of prices, right? And a lot of things driving it, including what's happening in Europe, including just a lot of domestic issues that are complicating things. But it makes it really hard for anybody who's buying fuel to kind of manage things when you have these tremendous, tremendous swings in the market.
And Scott, when we look at some of the events that happened in 2022, what are going to be some of the most impactful things that happened that we can learn from that we should be on the watch for in the upcoming year?
Well, you know, everybody's watching diesel fuel right now. So diesel fuel was a real big deal back in September. I just jotted some notes on some basic bulk spot pricing. You know, we got at one point, we got as high as $3.62 for Gulf Coast diesel, and now we're down to $2.85. So there's just a tremendous amount of movement in the market. What I think you're going to see is more upward pressure on diesel fuel prices because everybody's concerned about availability of supply and what's going to happen overseas. You look at this cold weather. I mean, I'm in the East, and it has gotten colder here than it's been at this time of year in a really long time. So I think we could be looking at a prolonged winter that's going to create demand for diesel fuel. You still have a lot of demand overseas. So I think what we're looking at for the first quarter is we're looking at some upward pressure on diesel fuel prices. Something that's interesting to watch is the Department of Energy statistics that come out every week is something good for people to watch. It kind of gives you a gauge on the market. There was a point back in late October, early November, where our diesel stocks nationwide were about 25% below where they were the year before. So we're starting to build up that gap. It's starting to go away, but the point of the market is that you're going to see volatility with diesel prices.
It's super interesting to watch kind of the way that things have changed in just the retail space over the last year, right? We spoke to John Kingston earlier about how there's still that massive spread between retail and wholesale prices when it comes to diesel. I believe it was last week, December 8th, where they hit that maximum high for the prices that we tracked in Sonar, over $2.25, which is absurd, it seems like, right? What do you think is going to be that catalyst that really narrows that spread between retail and wholesale, if there is one, or is it just going to stay very, very exaggerated?
Well, so, you know, what you have to remember is that what really drives prices is what we call bulk spot prices. So when I was talking about bulk prices, try saying that 5 times fast. When I was talking about bulk spot prices a few minutes ago, the movement in bulk spot prices is what affects what we call rack prices, which happen, you know, it's a wholesale price. It's not a retail price. And historically, spot and rack tend to move together. There's a lot of movement that is in conjunction, but the retail piece is always behind. So what you have right now is all this volatility in wholesale prices. You've seen a little bit of an adjustment downward on retail prices, but not a lot. So that's why you have this period of just incredible margins. It's not just on diesel fuel, it's also on gasoline as well. You just have these tremendously high margins. So these guys are doing very well. You know, are we going to see that continue? I think you will. Do I think you'll see it be as pronounced as it is right now? Probably not. I think you'll see retail prices start to edge lower. Now, again, it depends on where you are, right? So if you're in a market where there may be a lot of refinery turnarounds or there's any kind of supply issues heading into the winter, you know, you may not see that gap move, but it should ease its way down. It should narrow somewhat. but I don't think it's going to collapse.
Scott, of course, we all know some of that saying of like history sometimes doesn't repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes. When we look at the first quarter of 2023, what is going to be some of the things that aren't going to be the same factors that we faced 1 year ago that we're going to be looking at into this new landscape of the first quarter?
Well, that's a good question. So, what we are going to be looking at, obviously, is the continued impact of what's happening in Europe and how that's driving things. Demand is going to be interesting, right? So a lot of it is what is going to happen with the economy. I mean, is the economy going to hold up, or are we going to see more of a slowing down? Now, if you start to see a slowing down, that will put some pressure on prices. But I think there's just a lot of variables heading into it. To me, the biggest one is what's going to happen in Europe and what happens with the economy here in the States. This is, if I might add, this is a great time for a lot of our viewers to go back and look at their fuel contracts that they have with their suppliers. It's a good time to do what I call a tune-up on how you're buying fuel, right? So first step is let's look at your contract. Let's see what the price point is and see if you can renegotiate that in some way to take advantage of these huge dips in the spot market.
That was going to be my exact last question for you, Scott, is now we're coming to, there you go. We're coming to the end of the year. Obviously, taking a look and doing a tune-up is something that is definitely worth it. But if maybe you're looking and you aren't necessarily committed to fuel buying contracts, maybe you kind of play the market a little bit, what is a good strategy to not get caught so much from high fuel costs and from this volatility of the market? Or is there one? If you're playing, you got to play and you got to ride it.
Well, the best strategy is to not be without a contract. That's just the best strategy overwhelmingly, right? So if you have to have fuel, which most of our viewers do, if you're a carrier or if you're a truck stop, you have to have fuel, right? You have to have it. So trying to buy on what we call the open market, the spot market, is just it's going to be a disaster for most people. What you want to do is you want to look at your total fuel volumes. You want to tie about 75% of them up in a contract with a price that is visible, like a rack price or something like that. If you're buying on cost plus, that's really the best way to do it. And then for the remaining 25%, see if you can work out some formula pricing with your supplier. Like maybe you get the best of. So it's either a rack price at a particular location. It could be an average, or it could be an individual supplier price. Or I could do something like that price versus a Gulf Coast spot plus something, or a New York Harbor plus something, and I get the better of the two. You have to leverage your rateability, right? You have to look at how much you buy, and you have to use that as negotiating leverage. It's important to educate yourself. But back to what I was saying before, when you look at these dips in the market, right? So if you had a huge dip in these spot prices, you got to remember that your suppliers, they've got fuel sitting in their tank. They can't wait 3 days for the market to catch up. They need to sell into that market every single day, right? So if you have that visibility into those markets and you see that spot prices are coming off dramatically, that's when you see if you can pull the trigger on a deal like this, which will probably save you, a lot when you look at the difference between a rack price and a spot price, especially in a declining market. It's complicated, but it's really not that hard to figure out. But varying the way you buy is really the way to go. But I would not suggest to anybody that buys bulk fuel to not have a contract, especially in these markets. It would be crazy.
For some help on figuring out how to buy, of course, you host a show for us here on FreightWaves TV. For refuel going into 2023, are we looking at same time, same day?
We just did one, and we will be doing one. I don't have the date yet, but it's going to be somewhere around January 14th, and usually about 11:30 in the morning. It's a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. We're going to talk about fuel contracts next time, which is a big deal for your guys.
Awesome. Well, Scott, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and we're looking forward to your content in 2023, and we'll catch up with you soon.
You guys have an amazing holiday.
Have a good holiday, Scott. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We'll be right back with more FreightWaves Now in just a few minutes.
When guests come to an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products memberships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
It's a good day coming.
All right, guys, welcome back to FreightWaves Now, our second to last episode of the year. So we are going to continue this year-end theme, bringing you a nonprofit roundup with Shannon Currier from St. Christopher Truckers Relief Fund, one of our favorite charities here at FreightWaves. Shannon, thank you so much for joining us today. And we are super excited to hear about the progress that you guys made this year with St. Christopher.
Yes, thank you for having me, Anthony and Kaylee. It's so great to talk with you all again. Ooh, let me push this camera back. That looks a little bit close for me. How are you all? You ready for Christmas?
We are indeed, and we're excited to get to chat with you. And for those just now tuning in or just now hearing about your fund, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, so the St. Christopher Fund, we are a nonprofit in the trucking industry. Of course, we help drivers specifically when an injury or an illness has taken them off the road and they have financial difficulty. We can step in short term and cover necessity household expenses, including rent or mortgage, vehicle payments, insurance payments, and utility bills. We don't pay any medical bills. We're just really trying to be a safety net for these drivers and make sure that they aren't losing everything because of a short-term injury or illness. On top of that, we do free health and wellness programs, Rigs Without Cigs, which is a smoking cessation program, Driving Down Diabetes, which is a diabetes prevention program, and free flu, shingles, and pneumonia vaccines. And we are kicking off some cancer screenings in Q2 of 2023.
And so awesome to continue to see the programs that expand out of St. Christopher every year. Of course, we talked to you guys a lot last year, and the Rigs Without Cigs and the Driving Down Diabetes campaigns were two that were really kind of coming prominent for the fund. And now we're seeing all of these extra little facets added, not only to talk about drivers in times of hardship, but also just encouraging driver wellness as a whole, right? Talk a little bit about how that mindset really helps drivers change their overall outlook on their health and wellness.
Yes, so really the fact is, we all depend on drivers every day, day in, day out for everything, not just during COVID. This is every day, all the time. So if those drivers are not healthy and these men and women aren't behind the wheel, then pretty much everything's going to shut down and it's going to stop. So healthy drivers are super important to us, but should be super important to everybody because we always hear about the driver shortage. And so we want to have these drivers behind the wheel, and they want to be behind the wheel, but they need to be healthy so they can, be safe drivers behind the wheel and have a healthy career behind the wheel and then retire healthy as well. And so when we see these applications come in, that's where our health and wellness program come from. We are seeing the diagnoses that these drivers are dealing with. We're seeing smoking is very heavy in the trucking industry, wherein, the general population, it has started to decline, not so much in the trucking industry. It's a sedentary lifestyle. So we see a lot of, heart issues. We see a lot of diabetes. We see a lot of obesity. So all of our programs come out of what the drivers need. We are trying to meet these drivers where they are and provide them with programs that, one, don't cost them anything, and two, that they can do while they are on the road. And so that's how these programs came about. And I'll tell you, I was just getting brand new numbers as of yesterday from our Rigs Without Cigs and Driving Down Diabetes. And so look, driving down diabetes, blood pressure dropped by 10 systolic points, 5 diastolic points. Blood glucose levels dropped by 6 points. 138 pounds is the total weight loss for the group. Average weight loss was 7%. That is success in the drivers that participated in this program. And we have a new group that is kicking off in January. So if you are a driver and you're pre-diabetic, or have been told you're on that way, or you're a company owner and you have drivers that are moving that direction, we have a program for you, for your drivers, that won't cost you anything, because these programs are provided by corporate sponsorship money. And we are thankful to be able to offer these programs from our sponsors. Rigs Without Cigs, we've got 189 drivers that have quit, 124 that have cut back. I'm looking at those current numbers right now. So these are hugely successful numbers based on the number of people that are participating in these programs. But let me just say this, we need more drivers that are moving towards driver health. And encouraging drivers to do that really starts from the top down. So if you are at the top of one of these companies, encourage your drivers, share our information with your drivers, get involved in their health, their everyday health. You can see healthier drivers. You can see drivers that are happier behind the wheel, more productive behind the wheel, safer behind the wheel. And we've got the programs to help you do that.
And the proof is genuinely in those numbers to see that. It is incredible to see not only people taking control of their own health and wellness, but seeing that corporate support and then the results coming out of it in the numbers. Speaking of that corporate support, of course, fundraising is a massive goal and the huge place where those funds come from. Tell us a little bit about the fundraising goal. I can't remember exactly what it was the last time that we chatted, but I know you said you were close to the fundraising goal for this year. Have you met it?
It is a large goal. It was 1.2 in 22, so 1.2 million. We are not quite there yet. We've got a couple 300,000 that we would like to get before the end of the year to reach that goal. So I'm sure everybody has left for their holiday break, but I'm still reaching out and just seeing if anybody is needing or wanting to make an end of year donation. They are, of course, 100% tax deductible. So if you are looking for a place to donate, we would be honored to receive your donation. I know people have a million places that reach out to them asking for end of year donations. This directly supports our industry, directly supports the men and women that we all depend on every day. We would be honored to receive your donation. And we've got, it's only the 21st. So we have until the 31st to make that goal. And I'm confident that we are going to get there.
Definitely close to that goal indeed as we close out this year. And Shannon, if people want to get involved and donate, do they just head to truckersfund.org?
Yes, perfect place. Truckersfund.org. That is our website. And of course, you can find us on all social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. We're starting to get active on TikTok. We are out there. Or, of course, you can email me at shannon@truckersfund.org. I would be happy to talk with you.
Awesome, Shannon. Well, thank you so much for coming on to give us this year-end update. You guys still have 10 days to get out and make those donations. If maybe you are looking for a good place to give some Christmas cheer and joy to, go support St. Christopher Truckers Fund. Thank you so much, Shannon, again, and we'll talk to you in the new year.
Absolutely. Thank you all for your support. We can't do what we do without the FreightWaves team. So thank you guys. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
I'm definitely excited for any kind of initiatives we'll have in 2023 because our goals and outcomes are always fun. Did we have like a blue hair one?
Yeah, Grace Sharkey dyed her hair blue to compensate from that. I remember a conversation about blue eyebrows, but we never made it happen. Maybe this year is the year.
2023 might be the year of blue eyebrows.
We'll see. All right, we're going to head back on over to the wall. We've got our next carrier update ready to go.
Welcome into this carrier update. Donnie, we left off talking about the Port of LA. You mentioned it. Going to look at a couple other ports here. Going to the East Coast, looking at Savannah, I mean, obviously, we've been in this downward slide. Again, these are volumes on the ocean headed to the port. So, I mean.
And you see here, late November, they picked back up as well. And then since have dropped down a little bit and then recouping again here right before the end of the year. So again, similar to LA, not quite as, the numbers aren't quite as big here. You see kind of a little bit of the same pattern. Now, if you look back a year ago over there, down there on your end, you see that these volumes are very close to where we ended last year at as well. So it looks like we had a lot of build up throughout the year. A lot of change over to Savannah, and then a lot of normalization that's kind of brought it back to where it was. So still looks decently well compared, and comparatively, it's increasing a little bit. Now, if we go to the next chart here and look at the New York, New Jersey ports, it's a little bit different. It's dropped down, and it's held pretty steady here, right through here. So we see maybe this is losing some, really with the peak in between, both of them are losing some volumes. But it does kind of show some signs, Tony, that maybe a lot of these shippers avoided the West Coast when the boats backed up. We saw the big boom in the middle here for the East Coast ports, and then the volumes are dropping down, but we see LA picking back up.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, the stuff that was moving in May, early June, even April, that's what caused that backlog at these ports, especially on the East Coast. And it took months for them to work itself through because, I mean, you saw it happen on the West Coast, but that backlog really started in January and February.
Even before that, because remember last Christmas? We had boats on the water and we were worried about getting stuff unloaded for Christmas.
So it basically take what happened in LA and move it back 3, 4, 5 months. And guess what? We saw volumes fall off there. They fell off here. Well, now it's kind of this reversion of, hey, West Coast maybe isn't so bad after all.
I'd say when it comes down to saving money, it comes down to saving money. So, all right, next chart here, let's jump ship here, and let's run over here to diesel fuel here. Both retail and wholesale continue to fall, which is good, down to 481. Again, you can bring this up on a map and show it market by market, which is a good idea to do because I wanted to show that yesterday, but we ran out of time. But you'll see a lot of places in the Midwest where diesel fuel rates have increased. Ohio, Indiana, the Chicago area, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and a lot of that's due to heating oil. Heating oil competes with diesel fuel. And with this big cold front coming through, people are going to use, there's going to be a higher demand for the heating oil, which is going to push these fuel prices up. So there are a lot of markets where we were used to cheaper fuel prices in the Midwest, might have changed here. I'm talking well over $5 a gallon.
Yeah, and this is where staying on top of that is so important, especially if you're having to play, understanding where is the best bang for your buck in terms of filling up. Well, Donnie, thank you so much for this update. We'll check in with you again in the second hour. Right now, we'll look at the last 24 hours in freight with our market recap.
Welcome back to another edition of Check Call, Check Call, Check Call, Check Call.
Let's go.
Nobody works for free, so why should we be expecting our drivers to? Okay, let's just get it together now. What are some of those proactive steps that you can start taking now? For myself, I would like the Earth to still be here for a little bit longer, but you know, is a hot dog a sandwich?
Oh, okay. Is pizza an open-faced sandwich? It's bread.
I have been ready for this question. I've seen the show.
We're all in this together.
Thanks for making me hungry. Now I want a hot dog.
You're welcome. Catch episodes of Check Call Tuesdays at 12:30 on FreightWaves TV. Keep up with all things Check Call on freightwaves.com/checkcall. See you on the internet.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. Time to talk about that really extreme cold coming down for the entirety of the United States for your Christmas weekend. Looking at cold temperatures stretching even all the way down into central and parts of southern Florida for the time that the weekend hits. When we're talking about this cold, it is downright dangerous in some places as wind chills going to get down into those negative 50s and 60s. Wind chills down in Oklahoma, Texas, Alabama, Arkansas, Mississippi, places where you don't normally see this much cold, going to get down into the negatives for us. So let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events right now. Looking like it's staying pretty clear on the radar as far as these places go, but we do already have wind chill warnings and watches in place for pretty much all of Texas right now, down even into southern Texas, right along that Texas-Mexico border. Wind chill watches and warnings in place across Oklahoma, into Arkansas, Mississippi, and Alabama as well. Hard freeze warnings in place for central Alabama and Mississippi, and then down towards the Florida Panhandle, looking at a hard freeze there tonight into tomorrow. The real cold, though, doesn't really arrive until Thursday night into Friday morning behind that initial cold front, which is still draped up here across the central part of the northern plains. Temperatures behind that going to drop even further. So by the time that Friday morning into Friday evening hits, some of these places will be settling below zero for your lows, and our highs for your Saturday only going to get into the teens to 20s. Wind chills again in those negative teens to 20s for Kansas down into Oklahoma, Texas. This is definitely going to be the coldest air of the year that we've seen so far, and honestly rounding out your year with probably the coldest air that we will see, because by the time that next week rolls around, that cold air is in and out pretty quickly, and we get back to those mild seasonable temperatures across the southern U.S. for your Christmas week into New Year's. Overall, though, if you are headed out anywhere these next few days, travel is going to be difficult, if not impossible, going up into the Great Lakes region and then westward along the northern plains. It's just going to be very slow and delayed. So as people get ready to go out for their Christmas travel, be patient, take your time, drive safe if you're driving, make sure that you're taking care of your drivers and allowing them a little extra grace and time as well if they're moving anything up there around the Great Lakes or up to the northern plains. We'll talk more about weather coming up in the second hour of FreightWaves Now. We're going to pass it back over to Isaiah Buchanan for the Social Roundabout.
Welcome into Social Roundabout, everyone. I'm Isaiah Buchanan, and we had a very scary moment here in the Chattanooga area yesterday. This happened about 20 minutes away from our HQ here at FreightWaves. There was a train that hit a truck carrying a 60-foot concrete beam that was going to be a part of it was a bridge beam that was going to be a part of a construction project a little ways away. But take a look at this video. I'm going to warn you, it's pretty graphic. Norfolk Southern train just smacks right into that truck, smashing into that barrier. You can see all the concrete rubble right there. So that, like I said, that 60-foot concrete barrier was going to be a bridge beam for another construction project. You can see it was trying to cross the tracks and just could not do it in time. A total of 3 locomotives and 10 boxcars were derailed, and a large amount of diesel fuel was spilled at that site. Luckily, Hamilton County EMS says that only 2 people were hurt, but they do have minor injuries and are going to be okay. Now, switching things up just a little bit, Monday I talked to you and showed you a poll from Elon Musk asking whether or not he should step down as the CEO of Twitter. Well, the results of that poll have ended and come out, and Elon says that he's going to step down as Twitter CEO. You can see right here the poll shows that 57.5% of people said that yes, he should step down. And as Elon went on to say that, yes, I will resign as CEO as soon as I find someone foolish enough to take the job. After that, I will just run the software and servers teams. So we will continue to keep you updated on what Elon or who Elon decides to bring on to run Twitter. That's all I have for this edition of Social Roundabout. But right now, I'm going to toss things back over to Kaylee and Anthony.
And this just in from Twitter headquarters. Anthony Smith has been named CEO of Twitter. How do you feel?
I feel amazing.
Feeling chaotic here in the newsroom this morning. But seriously, it's going to be interesting to watch to see what happens with Twitter coming up in 2023.
Certainly will. And I'm excited for some of our social roundabouts for 2023. And I'm also excited for some of our social takes later on this show with the very own Blythe Brumleve that's going to be joining us in a few moments.
So she'll be joining us for a little bit to round out our show today. Anthony, we also have a handful of virtual events coming up to start off our new year. The first one in literally just about 3 weeks. So if you haven't gotten registered for the Sales and Marketing Summit just quite yet, go ahead and do that because it is coming up quickly on the calendar. Free registration, so you know what? Nobody has to gift you anything for this. You can just head on over to live.freightwaves.com and get registered for that. Following that, of course, we have another full slate of events coming up all the way through. Global Supply Chain Week happening already the end of February. It's going to be a good one.
That's right, and I'm going to be looking forward to those in-person events as well. We're going to be in Cleveland in the middle of the year and get those calendars set because it's going to be a great one.
Absolutely. Following that, of course, the Future of Freight Festival coming back here to Hometown Heroes in Chattanooga, Tennessee. You don't want to miss it. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We'll be right back to start off your second hour of FreightWaves Now in just a few minutes.
To an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
It's a good day coming.
welcome into the second hour of FreightWaves Now and this carrier update. Donnie, going to start here. We talked about at the end diesel fuel prices of that last carrier update. We're seeing the spread kind of stay in this little, I mean, it's obviously staying elevated compared to where it normally was.
And it's starting to pick back up to $1.83, which again tells us these fuel stations are still making a lot of high profits on these on diesel fuel. And of course, right now it's Christmas time. You got 25% of America is about to start crossing the country one way or the other, traveling to see family. So, you know, here they're taking advantage of the high demand and with the higher fuel prices.
Yep.
What's going to happen in first quarter? Well, demand for trucking is going to go down. Hopefully we'll see these drop on down. But there's a good 80 cents we could see this drop right now, and they would still be just fine.
Yeah, exactly.
And that would really save a lot. That would really put a lot of money back into America's pockets, but instead it's going into these pockets of these gasoline stations, and it's making us struggle. It's going to hurt the economy when here the biggest time of the year, we're having to spend our money on food, groceries, and not into the economy, which will, again, help that downward spiral pick up a little bit faster. We need to keep spending money to help our economy, you know, and I'm not talking about for utilities or food or whatnot. We need to have that extra spending for the vacations and the toys.
The discretionary spending, that's the important part.
Exactly. But we see this picking back up, so prices are coming down, the spread's picking back up. This is good for the large trucking companies, which are going to need it because they're going to need that money to invest to keep afloat during these next 4, 5, 6 months, maybe longer. Because, you know, when you have a little bit of change, and you multiply that times 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 trucks, that can be a very big number on your balance sheet.
Yeah, very quickly, especially when they're fueling up almost every day, right? I mean, you think about the amount of fuel that a trucking company goes through in a single day. Pennies make the dollar, for sure.
Yes. Let's hop over the next chart here. The NTI. Let's bounce back up for a couple days in a row. We'll see how high we can get this. Is it going to sustain? Here we're into Wednesday. So Thursday and Friday might be some bigger days. And sadly enough, we might see another kind of big peak in between Christmas and New Year's. And that's going to be probably the peak of the peaks.
Yeah.
And then we're going to be done with that for the end of the year. And then probably starting into January and February down a bit further. But, you know, are we going to hit 270? What do you think, Tony?
I mean, I would think so, just given, because I mean, this is what, yesterday's rate. So I mean, I would think, so Tuesday, we've got, what, 3 days? I would think we do. I mean, given that we've gone up 13 cents in 2 days, I would think that there's a good chance we do hit 270, but in terms of going higher than that, I don't know.
Over and under, you choose
I'll take over.
I'll take under.
All right.
All right. When we come back here next time, Tony will look some lanes of the day. And when we return after the first year, we'll see how all this works out.
Awesome stuff, Donnie. Thank you as always. Right now, we'll toss it back over to Kaylee and Anthony.
Thanks for that. We'll get one more carrier update to round out your year at the end of the show. Right now, we're going to welcome in Blythe Brumleve, our social media queen, back to the stage to talk a little bit about a year recap for 2023 and what we can expect to do in 2023. Blythe, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you guys so much for having me. One quick thing, go Jags for all the Titans and the Cowboys fans over at FreightWaves.
You know, I heard Frazier back in my ear with the little go Titans, and I'm not foolish enough to say go Cowboys on air, so like I'm not even going to.
It's been a good couple of weeks for us. We got to showboat while we can.
There is so much going on. As you said, go Jags. They're second in the AFC South. New Mexico State Aggies going bowling and a bowl game day after Christmas. AI is taking over art, and now SA's Elon Musk is putting out crazy polls on Twitter. People are getting platformed, deplatformed. There's just so much going on, and we're glad we have you here to guide us through us all. Let's start off with the AI aspect and really what's going on with that AI chat.
So it's AI Chat GPT. It's kind of taken over the internet over the last few weeks. It was released in late November. And to kind of understand it, we've talked before on FreightWaves Now about, these different tools that are coming into the market. DALL-E, DALL-E 2 being one of them, which is an AI image generator. And the way that these things work is that you take a prompt, say a semi-truck carrying Christmas cheer, and you take that prompt and you put it into the AI image generator, and it will pop out a semi truck driving down the highway during winter months, loaded up with Christmas lights, all decked out in Christmas lights. And that's a perfect example of some of these tools that are coming into the market. And now one of the newer ones that has come into the market by the same company, OpenAI, they developed DALL-E 2, and now they've released the Chat GPT. And it's a language model where you can have a conversation back and forth with AI generated language models that have, it's essentially all of the human generated knowledge that we know of over the last, say, decade of learning has been loaded into the system, and you can have conversations with them. So there's already rumors being, sort of thrown around that it's going to overtake doctors whenever they prescribe. They listen to what, kind of experiences you're going through, and then it will spit out a diagnosis. There are lawyers where you spit out or you enter in what's going on with a legal case that our lawyers are worried because now they're getting legal advice online. Marketers in and of itself are worried as well, because a lot of these jobs that we've been doing for years creatively, now it's being, that's the next coming that's coming for our jobs, is all of these different AI tools, where a lot of sort of the conversation has been in recent years around AI and automation, that it's coming for the blue collar jobs, when in reality, it's coming for the white collar jobs first before it comes for those blue collar jobs. And we're experiencing that rapid evolution of these different technologies in real time. And a lot of the population doesn't even know that they exist, but they are already here and they're evolving rapidly.
So do we now see the threat of an AI broker, where a shipper calls a brokerage and says, hey, I need this load, and your AI answers and says, okay, this is what we're going to do. And boom, it's computer generated. It runs through a million different scenarios faster than your broker can do it. And then it essentially gets your broker out of a job. Is that a real threat to the freight industry?
100%. It absolutely is a real threat, because a lot of these different jobs that require a lot of computing, they require a lot of historical knowledge. All of that can be plugged into one of these AI language models. And what this sort of the landscape looks like, this isn't something that's going to happen, in the next year or so, but it could happen within the next 5 years, because Microsoft is one of the big funders of OpenAI, which has given us the tools for ChatGPT and DALL-E 2. And so if Microsoft is getting involved, then that means there's search engine Bing is going to be affected, and combining all of that data into their workplace technologies is something to really be out on the lookout for. Now, for a lot of the transportation industry overall, personally as a marketer, I have really struggled with using TMS platforms in order to create marketing campaigns. And that was one of my first thoughts as a marketer, is like, oh my God, I would be able to take these data sets that TMS systems are using and plug it into a language model like ChatGPT, and be able to come up with a year-long marketing plan of the commodities I'm going to target, the shippers that manufacture those different commodities, and what kind of lanes are the most profitable for this company, and create marketing plans based around all of that different data. So from a marketing perspective, I already see the possibilities with tools like this, and that it only makes sense for those tools to continue to evolve as we continue to add more language and conversational mechanisms into these platforms, which are, like I said earlier, evolving rapidly.
And Blythe, do we start to see AI in response to AI? So, for example, people reaching out get an AI kickback, but do we start to see AI reaching out to other companies, and then you just have this interface of AI speaking to AI?
There's actually a few use cases already for that. There's one company in particular that is using these language models in order to help you get a cheaper bill. And so you will tell them what bills that you are already subscribed to, or maybe you have an insurance premium that you would want to get negotiated down. And there were actual use case examples of these technologies using a language platform like ChatGPT, and then negotiating lower insurance premiums for their health insurance. And so there's different use cases like that already happening. But then there's also the ethical concerns as well. Some of these answers that the AI spits out are really incredibly mind-blowing, but then some of them are just not very good yet. But that's part of the learning process for the language models within these AIs. And so, for example, there are a lot of different, technologies that exist on the market that is not going to give you a clear-cut diagnosis. But say for web code, create a website for me, the 5-page website based off of this information, and it will plug, it'll just spit out all of the different website code for you immediately. But then there's the flip side of it where you have somebody that is asking, okay, well, how do you make a Molotov cocktail? And the system gives you that recipe. So there's different sort of ethical, moral things, discussions that are going on right now. And ChatGPT has been updated to omit some of those answers from the platform, but it's also a situation where other users have been able to replicate that same sort of language talking back and forth to each other by simply rephrasing the question. So it brings up a lot of ethical concerns. And if we know anything about, sort of governments and how slow they are to react to social media and different technologies that exist right now, these are different technologies that are just going to simply take over in the near future. And I don't mean to sound like, sort of worrisome, because I do think that a lot of these technologies are really impactful in a positive way, but you can't talk about the positive without talking about some of the negative aspects too.
Do you think that we start to see this evolution of like a dark AI space? Like we kind of saw, we've got the web and then we have like the dark web where all of the shady things live. Do you think that we see that as well, where people take this kind of same concept and use it for nefarious reasons in an environment that is less regulated?
I mean, it's only a matter of time for before some of these things do happen. I mean, like I said, ChatGPT, the owners, OpenAI, have already restricted some of the languages and some of the things that you can prompt the system with. So, for example, I asked it to write a contract for me. I'm a creator. I'm a podcaster. I asked it to write a podcast contract for me, and it wouldn't do that. It said, "I'm sorry, you have to actually seek legal advice." But I just rephrased the question. I said, "Well, what would be important to include in a podcaster's contract?" And it listed out 5 to 6 bullet points to make sure that I include in the contract. So there's the good side of it, but then on the bad side of it, like with the Molotov cocktail and things like that. So the OpenAI company is trying to curve some of those and trying to prevent, some of those sort of nefarious actors and nefarious questions. But it is an active learning model. So it's a situation where they're letting the public kind of play around with it right now to see what the possibilities are in order to sort of, put a stopgap on some of those things that could become a bigger problem in the future. But if this technology, it's safe to say that if this kind of technology already exists and is available open to the public, that there's already a black market for it that's going to exist that has other types of language models that work exactly like ChatGPT and that are going to be used for more nefarious reasons. And that's where you kind of got to get into the battle of, the good technology versus the bad technology and how they're going to collaborate together or not collaborate together.
And Blythe, one of the things that you did mention earlier, of course, is around some of the images that you're able to generate as well. Do we start to see AI being able to identify or now identifying what some AI-generated images are, or even really being able to identify maybe AI-generated stories or articles and things like that in order to kind of combat some of the maybe fake images or fake articles that might be written out that may be a little bit deceptive?
Well, there are some kind of tools out there already that exist that, you plug in. So say professors, for example, are extremely worried about college kids being able to use this to write their research papers. And he took a bunch of these papers and he did a blind test study, and he had some that were created with ChatGPT and he had some that were actually created by students. And a lot of the papers that he graded, the AI came into the bottom 20 of his students. So it was about on the level of like a bad college student, but it still was able to produce something that was worthy of him to give it a decent average grade. And so you have a situation like that where you're not exactly sure how these programs are going to be used by nefarious actors in the future, but also how you are able to check, because there are tools out there that do check and see if you're using that different type of text methodology, because there is a certain kind of methodology that these AI platforms are using, and they're not able to judge it right away. It's not like a Copyscape where you can take copy and plug it in and get, a plagiarism score. There are different different because it's trained by humans and because it's a active human language model. It's very challenging to judge the difference between AI and what's actually human generated. And then there's also a greater debate on if, the AI is still human generated. You could still make an argument that you're responsible for the prompt that you put into these language models. And so is that a form of human work? And that's being debated as we speak. There's, copyright concerns with a lot of these different images, but then there's also an artist who created all of these different prompts and created a story and put those together into a book. And she has filed for that book to become copyright protected. And that is going through the copyright courts right now. And that's going to be a major determination on if you can use these tools and how much of human involvement really is involved during this process. She has to prove that she came up with these prompts, and then they're going to make that judgment coming from there. But it's all sort of new territory, and these tools are evolving very quickly, and we don't have the tools in place to combat some of the bad stuff, and we don't have the tools in place to combat some of maybe the plagiarism that exists, because if you're using these tools, these open AI tools such as image generators and text, they are pulling that information from somewhere, and they're pulling them sometimes from copyrighted works as well. So it's a whole legal sort of landmine whack-a-mole situation where we're not exactly sure because they're evolving so quickly, and we don't know if these other platforms and these other laws and regulations can keep up.
It's going to be a whole thing going forward. Blythe, thank you for joining us today. We're going to have you on tomorrow as well to recap 2022 and get some ideas and thoughts for 2023. So we'll talk to you then.
Looking forward to it.
Right now, we're going to toss it over to Sydney Edwards with today's top stories.
With a full look at our headlines for the day, I'm Sydney Edwards. Now, the Environmental Protection Agency has issued a final rule on its heavy-duty truck tailpipe emissions, and the response has been mixed. Engine manufacturers and trucking organizations say that compliance will be difficult going forward. The EPA chose a one-step emissions change for nitrous oxide emissions, with enforcement starting in 2027. The new standards will be 80% stronger than rules released last year and increase the useful life of vehicles by 1.5 to 2.5 times. And both Port Houston and Corpus Christi saw increased volumes in November, mostly thanks to strong imports of autos and auto parts and strong exports of U.S. petroleum and crude oil. Port Houston reached 3.6 million TEUs for the year in November, with monthly imports up 11% year over year. This was the fourth highest year ever for containers at the port, and yearly volume is up 17% since January. Officials say steel imports are slowing while auto imports are soaring. Steel was down 21% year over year in November compared to 2021, and auto imports were up 141% year over year. FedEx posted its fiscal 2023 second quarter results late yesterday that showed its ability to quickly cut costs was not enough to stop the damage a demand slowdown is having on its top line. The carrier reported adjusted diluted earnings per share of $3.18. That's 44 cents over analyst expectations. Revenue came in about $990 million under expectations at $22.8 billion. This is nearly a $1 billion drop year over year for FedEx. Operating margin fell down to 5.3% from 7.1% last year, with net income dropping to $815 million. And Congress has revealed its fiscal year 2023 funding bill, which includes measures affecting trucking and ocean shipping. The $1.7 trillion Consolidated Appropriations Act is a spending bill that combines 12 spending packages, including $106 billion to fund the U.S. Department of Transportation. Congress is expected to approve and pass the bill by the end of this week. Most of the DOT provisions were released over the summer when the House version of the bill was introduced, and one of those provisions includes clearer differentiation between truck brokers, agents, and dispatch services. Congress wants the FMCSA to finalize its guidelines by next summer in order to get it into the bill. And real estate investment trust and cold chain giant Lineage Logistics has raised $700 million in equity financing from new and existing investors. The capital raised brings Lineage's total raise this year to $2.4 billion and will support a $1.25 billion build-out of 20 new and expanding projects, as well as supporting the creation of 2 fully automated U.S. super hubs. Lineage currently operates 1 super hub in the United Kingdom. The funds will also increase company investment in solar capacity, which they plan to increase by 50% in 2023. Now you can find details on these stories and, of course, more happening at FreightWaves.com and on our FreightWaves app. If you're watching us live on our YouTube channel, give us a like and subscribe. You can get the full FreightWaves TV experience by heading on over to tv.freightwaves.com. I'll hand this over now to Kaylee Nix with a check of our weather.
All right, Cindy, thank you for that. Moving into our next weather segment, talking about the snowfall coming out of this winter storm expected for your Christmas weekend. Right now, we've got the snowfall map on for day 1 through day 5, so these are going to be a forecasted total accumulations. And this is still pretty decently far out, so we're talking today, Wednesday, day 5 through Sunday of next weekend through your Christmas day. And even though we're going to be seeing this winter storm drop a pretty substantial amount of snow around New England into the Great Lakes area and the Northern Plains, that's confirmed. Full snowfall amounts are not 100% certain yet. Let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events. What we're going to be doing is watching the potential for some heavy snowfall, mostly around the Great Lakes, then into Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. That's right now the places where we have winter storm warnings and blizzard warnings up and in effect. Total snowfall for these areas going to be looking between about 6 to 8 inches in some spots, possibly higher amounts between 10 to a foot and a half. And then further down towards the south-southeast, that's where we start to get a little bit of uncertainty in the forecast. Some folks across northern Arkansas, northeastern and northwestern Tennessee into Kentucky looking at having a dusting to about a half an inch by the time that we're all said and done with this storm. But that's really going to depend on how quickly the moisture can get in and how long that moisture lasts, where we're going to see the most snow. Either way, the snowfall is on top of existing snow, so that's going to make travel really, really hard for some places that are already dealing with snow issues, specifically around the upper parts of Minnesota and Wisconsin, because when it gets this cold out there, we're talking negative teens and 20s. Any measures and precautions that get taken to clear the roadways, so plows can't get out to operate just because it is so cold and icy, and then the salt and then the brine that gets put on the roads just doesn't work simply when it is that cold out there. So either way, travel and freight movement going to be very, very difficult coming up these next few days because of this winter storm. Good news is that it moves out pretty quickly, though, as we follow the week into Christmas and New Year, so we should see a speedy recovery from it. We'll talk a little bit more about weather coming up later on in the show for our last time. We're going to go ahead and take a look at this week's FreightWaves Mailbag segment, which has some bold predictions from some of our experts.
Hi folks, Bill Priestley here one more time in 2022 as we do our final mailbag of the year. This is where we take our social media posts with the hashtag FWMailbag or your emails at mailbag@freightwaves.com. Take those questions, get them to our experts, and get the answers back to you. This final mailbag of the year, pretty much a predictable question though. What is your bravest prediction about what's going to happen in 2023 in freight? Here's what the experts had to say.
There's so much that can happen on oil, but the number that really is sticking out to me is the latest fourth quarter 2023 demand estimate from the International Energy Agency, over 103 million barrels a day. We have never consumed that much oil. This is going to be an all-time record. And remember, we were regularly breaking records for years, but then that was thrown off track by the pandemic, but now we're definitely very much back on track. And when the IEA does its math, it gives a number of what it thinks OPEC needs to produce to balance the market. And quite frankly, what OPEC is producing now is nowhere near what the IEA thinks OPEC needs to produce in the fourth quarter of next year. So right now, without a ramp up in oil production worldwide, even if you have no other disruptions, and you get the Chinese coming back, I'm a little concerned for the supply-demand balance in the second half of next year, particularly the fourth quarter with that staggering 103 number that came out of the IEA.
My hot freight opinion for 2023 is going to be the return of peak season. I think that 2023, the second half, will kind of start to see something a little bit more close close to what we saw in 2018 and 2019. I think it will be the return of a historic peak season, or at least a traditional peak season as we know it, instead of the muted peak season we had this year, and then the absolute wild and crazy one that we had for the last 2 years.
I don't know if this one's a huge surprise, but I think there will be a major bankruptcy in the freight space sometime in 2023. I mean, as consumer behaviors have started to shift from goods back to services, obviously freight demand has fallen. Costs have risen and continue to rise in some cases. You've seen rates decline. So whenever you have operating expenses increasing while revenues are slowly declining, I think that's a time frame where you're going to see the squeeze put on in some of these players within the freight space, and ultimately it could lead to a bankruptcy in a major player.
Okay, I said this yesterday on Great Quarter Gals, but my hottest take on what I think is going to happen in freight in 2023 is I think that we will see immediate and swift government action in the ILWU labor negotiations if an agreement is not reached. So we won't go through all the drama that we saw with the rail negotiations. The government will just be like, nope, we're stepping in, and labor is going to get a big W this year.
In 2023, I expect the U.S. Surface Transportation Board to issue a new regulation pertaining to railroad service. So the railroads have to do X, Y, and Z in order to comply with their common carrier obligation. I think we'll see that. And I also think we'll see the Federal Railroad Administration, that's the organization that oversees safety issues, mandate a two-person crew in locomotives long haul. So that will no longer be something that, the potential of a one-person crew is no longer something that the unions could potentially negotiate away. I think it'll be a federal law to have two people in the locomotive.
Biggest surprise for 2023, I'm going to call it a large trucking company will go out of business right at the very bottom of the market, and had they have stayed around, it would have actually improved. In true human fashion, we'll either see a large acquisition or large bankruptcy. As if rates keep going down and interest rates go up, it gets more difficult to fund the financing as well as banking processes that underpin trucking. So keep your eyes peeled, folks.
That's going to do it for Mailbag here in 2022. A reminder, if you'd like to get your question on Mailbag, just send us a social media post with the hashtag FWMailbag or email us at mailbag@freightwaves.com. We will see you in the new year.
The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
What does this have to do with freight? Well, I'm glad you asked. People are wondering what's going to happen with inflation. Is there going to be hyperinflation? When is hyperinflation going to be here? When is there going to be inflation? What's going to happen with inflation? Inflation. This is the sexiest topic within the economy right now.
welcome back to FreightWaves Now in this final carrier update of the year. Donnie, gonna break down our lanes of the day first. Starting off in Chicago, out of Chicago, rates have been fairly strong for the last few weeks.
Probably one of the hottest markets in the nation is probably the Chicago market and the surrounding markets. And I keep bringing it back up because these are the numbers I keep consistently hitting, over $3 a mile. So, of course, this is Chicago going to the bottom part of the Northeast, but it's still 658 miles, $3.20 a mile. Definitely, if I was a carrier, I'd be accepting all the freight that I can into Chicago and checking out those spot rates to see where they go after that, how I can get my truck back or not, and what those rates are. Changing lanes here to the next chart here. Chicago headed out west. Let's take the long haul. Still $1.81, and as you can see, these lanes are slightly trending upward.
Yeah.
So $1.81, but you're looking at over 2,000 miles.
Yeah.
We know once you got out to LA, coming back west right, or coming back east from LA pays pretty well. So this could still be a very profitable lane for you leaving Chicago, headed out to Los Angeles. So maybe get your trucks to Chicago, then find your load out to LA, then of course come back, and you have a pretty good couple weeks of running right there.
Yeah, I mean, you'll be busy for sure.
Next lane here, let's check Atlanta, Georgia. Again, Atlanta's starting to pick up some. We go Atlanta to Harrisburg. We see rates have picked up there about the first week of December, and you're up to $2.53, 700-mile run. Yes, it is a little bit low, but still coming out of the south at $2.53 for over 700 miles is a pretty good rate right now.
Yep, absolutely.
Jump out here, head Atlanta up to Chicago, and this lane it picked up a little bit when we first came in the month of December, and then it started trending back down just a little bit. Now, normally when you get a market that starts to get very hot, lanes going into that market start to deteriorate, and that's really what's probably happened here. It's $1.97, well below our NTI, so Atlanta to Chicago, this is a lane that you probably want to run under contract, not on spot rate.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's one, especially with you see the gap between the NTI and it open up, right? I mean, you can see the deterioration in this rate over the last 5-6 months. I mean, look where it was in July at $2.70.
Yeah.
We've cut, 73 cents in a few months.
The rate's almost been cut in half.
Yeah.
Not a good lane, but the South struggles a lot. Out of Macon, definitely Florida, Birmingham, Charlotte. A lot of people avoid that area in the Southeast during this time of the year. Next lane here, let's look at a little bit of Dallas here. Dallas headed out to Atlanta. Well, if we see Atlanta deteriorating, that might, we might see something else going on the other end. Well, Dallas here was struggling pretty strong for a while there, and here now we start seeing rates come back up out of the Dallas market. So it's still a little bit low at 221, but it is recovering from a long period of decline. So good news for carriers out of the Dallas market.
Absolutely, it's stuff to pay attention to over the next week and a half as we get into 2023. Donnie, thank you so much for the updates this year. We'll be sure to check in with you again next year. Right now, we'll toss it over to Isaiah Buchanan.
Welcome into Social Roundabout, everyone. I'm Isaiah Buchanan, and we had a very scary moment here in the Chattanooga area yesterday. A train derailed after hitting a truck that was carrying a 60-foot concrete beam. Take a look at this video. I want to warn you, it is pretty graphic. This happened just about 20 minutes away here from HQ here at FreightWaves. You can see that the truck was trying to get across the tracks and just was not able to do it before the train hit that concrete barrier. Now that barrier was going to be used as a bridge beam for another construction project. So there was a total of 3 locomotives and 10 boxcars that were derailed because of this accident, and a ton of diesel fuel was spilled. Luckily, Hamilton County EMS here in Chattanooga announced that there were only 2 minor injuries. Both people are going to be okay. So we're glad to hear that there were no serious injuries or deaths because of this incident here in the Chattanooga area. That's all I have for this edition of the Social Roundabout. But right now, I'm going to toss things over to Bill Priestley with our Roundtable.
And welcome into the Roundtable. Bill Priestley here with you. And today we're going to be talking about the future of air cargo facilities, as this seems to be a changing world. We've got two people here that can talk to us with some great experience with that as well. First off, John Carver, CEO of Burrell Aviation, and also our own air cargo editor, Eric Kulish, joining us here as well. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. John, let me start with you. Just in terms of an overall, say, 50,000-foot perspective in this, how widespread is the need now for newer or expansive air cargo facilities at our nation's airports?
The situation at U.S. airports right now is pretty acute as it relates to the need for air cargo, and it really starts at the top down. It starts with the major gateway airports that are at or nearing capacity in terms of what they can accommodate in terms of future air cargo growth. And it's creating opportunity for the airports at the next level down, the more regional and municipal airports, to try and capture some of that overflow volume that used to be dedicated to the major international airports. And much of the focus over the last 20 years in the airport system has been on the on the passenger side of the business, improving security, obviously, after 9/11, addressing the emerging technologies with cell technology, 5G technology, improving the passenger experience from lounges and concessions all the way to accommodating Uber and Lyft and the transportation network carriers. And very little attention has been put onto the cargo side. When COVID came on board a few years ago, it really put a spotlight on air cargo, and it reminded the major airports how important that really is to the overall ecosystem. And many of these large airports, if you look at Miami, look at LAX, look at JFK, they're now trying to play catch up to create volumes that they know are coming that they're unable to really accommodate. And for the next tier down of airports, they're finding the opportunity to try and capture some of that new business that will provide a more diversified and resilient airport system for themselves and the regions they serve.
Gotcha. Eric, anything to add to that in terms of what you've seen in the air cargo scene?
Yeah, no, I think that's correct. And, I think there has been you've seen this stepped up activity at the major airport level after, what you might term as years of neglect, benign neglect in infrastructure for cargo. LAX, Miami, JFK. Now you have Philadelphia, seeing itself as a potential cargo hub and trying to invest. Atlanta has some new facilities. So you're seeing a lot of activity, some of it now, but some of it kind of future planning that'll come in the next decade or so. But there's so much cargo, and the pandemic highlighted just how congested some of these airports can be, especially as they're trying to serve passenger airlines at the same time. And so cargo is a secondary product at some of these places, and so you don't have the same kind of prioritization with customs and road feeder access and access to the terminal. So these secondary airports are often really good for freighter operators because they can just fly in, pull up airside, and get pretty immediate loading and unloading and customs treatment, and they're on their way, rather than being stuck with cargo stuck in the terminals waiting to be sorted and spoon fed out to the forwarders. So that's kind of what we're seeing right now.
Gotcha. And going to those kind of spillover markets, John, let me turn back to you in terms of what you guys are doing, I believe, in Colorado right now, in terms of trying to help out at least one airport deal with these spillover issues and helping move cargo through these kind of secondary tier airports.
Well, I mean, for us, it's an opportunity, and for the regional airports, it's an opportunity. Municipal airports, in some cases, it is as well. What we have found is that across the board, with few notable exceptions, most airports did not put money into their capital improvement for this non-passenger type of infrastructure. Again, the focus and the capital is, for the most part, being directed towards airfield improvements and the passenger elements of the airport, and for good reasons, because for most airports, that's the lion's share of the revenue that they generate. But as we sit today, and with this need for improvement of the air cargo supply chain component, the opportunity for private sector investment is huge, because the airports, as I said, don't have money in their capital improvement plans for the most part, and the airlines and the cargo handlers and the operators that deal in this space, freight forwarders, are not equipped to provide infrastructure funding for new facilities either. So the private sector becomes the third leg of the stool, and is able to really seize the opportunity to invest and provide capital investment into strategically located airports around the country. And we're proud to have 21 airports now in our portfolio where we are doing just that. We are helping the airports modernize their infrastructure, replace aging facilities, create the environment to attract new airlines, dedicated freighter airlines, and some of the other logistics elements that cluster around the airport ecosystem as it relates to the cargo supply chain.
John, let me stay with you there, because you allude to some solutions that perhaps obviously some airports can do and others cannot. I know that Toronto is looking into replacing office space in terms of converting that into air cargo usage. What are some of the solutions that you're seeing amongst your portfolio in terms of how air cargo facilities are being improved across the country?
Well, I think it's really readying sites for near-term development. And this is a speed to market type of a component of the airport world that cannot wait 5-10 years for land to come online. So what we're focused on is working with our airport partners to prepare land parcels that can be shovel ready for development within the next, let's say, 18 to 24 months. And with an accelerated development timeline, we can provide solutions, create the jobs that air cargo represents, create new revenue streams for the airport, and maintain this supply chain evolution that's occurring in the air cargo world within the next 3 to 4 years. So much of what the airports are doing that we're working with is dedicating resources to preparing land parcels for near-term development. That's adding taxiways, that's in some cases widening their runways, lengthening their runways, doing what is needed to be able to capture that those cargo volumes that are out there and expected to continue rising over the next many years.
Eric, one of the things that we've talked about is the fact that LAX has put out a bid perhaps to create, as LA is likely to do, put out something that's big and shiny and new and possibly very innovative. Give us what is LAX looking at, and are they looking perhaps to make a standard out of everything else that we've seen across the country?
Yeah, well, I think John could talk to that some. He used to work at the Airport Authority in LA, and kind of in some of this pre-development that they put on pause for a few years when COVID hit. But LAX is a perfect example, right? So they have, it's one of the top 2, airports in the U.S., and not including FedEx and UPS hubs. And so it's a very large international cargo hub, but the infrastructure is 40, 50 years old plus. It's got old buildings that aren't really equipped for modern cross-docking and sorting, and the cargo facilities are scattered all over. It's very difficult for trucks to get in and out. So they're kind of reimagining how that could be all kind of combined in a more, concentrated and efficient cargo village type of structure. But, they're many years away from getting that off the ground. There's a lot of environmental and other planning procedures, and then more RFPs. And so, when you go that route, it takes a long time. I think what Burrell Aviation is doing with these smaller regional airports is very interesting, because they're kind of getting out ahead of that and saying, before even an airport realizes and does a study that they need cargo and how to achieve it, they're coming in and kind of explaining the issue and saying, we'll jumpstart it and get, lay the groundwork and get everything ready. And, we can pop these up much quicker as soon as you're ready to go, or there's tenants, the cargo infrastructure is in place. So it's kind of two different business models or approaches, from a public sector and a private sector approach.
It is certainly a fascinating area of air cargo that we need to be watching, of course, as you mentioned, over the course of the next 2 to 5 years. John Carver, CEO of Burrell Aviation, Eric Kulish, our air cargo editor, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, we will take a break and we'll be back right after this.
When guests come to an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
What does this have to do with freight? Well, I'm glad you asked. People are wondering what's going to happen with inflation. Is there going to be hyperinflation? When is hyperinflation going to be here? When is there going to be inflation? What's going to happen with inflation? Inflation, inflation, inflation. This is the sexiest topic within the economy right now.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for your final check of the weather for the year, as we are done and dusted after this. And we've been talking about it pretty much all week, that big time winter storm coming across the country, really starting to ramp up for those northern parts of the Great Plains, and will turn into a downright dangerous situation for the Great Lakes and the northern parts of the Ohio Valley by this time tomorrow afternoon. Let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events and just do a kind of a broad recap of what we can expect. Starting off with folks in the Pacific Northwest, we still do have winter storm watches and warnings in place across Washington and Oregon as some light precipitation continues around the mountain areas, but the bulk of that is down into southeastern Idaho and southwest or northwestern Wyoming, that is. Salt Lake City, Utah, already starting to see some impacts from the winter storms too. And yes, this is already starting to impact your travel if you are traveling by air ahead of this Christmas holiday. And it will eventually impact your road travel as well, moving through the end of this week. Heaviest snow now is already moving into central North Dakota and then central Minnesota. The Minnesota areas where we've got blizzard warnings in place. And because of this, visibility there down to zero or even sometimes less than that zero visibility. So just don't go on the roads at all if you can avoid it here across the northern parts of Minnesota right now. And then the rest of the folks looking down from Iowa, Missouri, Illinois into Indiana, that's where we're going to see the storm really start to develop and ramp up tomorrow on into your Friday. Overall, though, for pretty much the entire country, temperature is going to get down to dangerous levels between lows and your wind chills. Some folks all the way in central Oklahoma down towards southern Texas going to be seeing temperatures staying in those single digits, wind chills in the negative teens to 20s in some places. And as far as up for the northern Great Plains, it's going to be absolutely miserable out there, wind chills in the negative 40s to 50s in some places. So basically across the entire country, make sure you are bundling up for this Christmas holiday, being careful out on the roads, taking some extra time if you need it, and for those final loads moving before Christmas, give them a little bit of grace. It's going to be difficult to get those out. That does it for your weather here today. We're going to toss it back over to Sydney Edwards for a final check of top stories.
With a last look at our headlines for the day, I'm Sydney Edwards. Now, Congress has revealed its fiscal year 2023 funding bill, which includes measures affecting trucking and ocean shipping. The $1.7 trillion Consolidated Appropriations Act is a spending bill that combines 12 spending packages, including $106 billion to fund the U.S. Department of Transportation. Congress is expected to approve and pass the bill by the end of this week. Most of the DOT provisions were released over the summer when the House version of the bill was introduced, and one of those provisions includes clearer differentiation between truck brokers, agents, and dispatch services. Congress wants the FMCSA to finalize its guidelines by next summer in order to get it into the bill. And real estate investment trust and cold chain giant Lineage Logistics has raised $700 million in equity financing from new and existing investors. The capital raise brings Lineage's total raise this year to $2.4 billion and will support a $1.25 billion build-out of 20 new and expanding projects, as well as supporting the creation of 2 fully automated U.S. super hubs. Lineage currently operates 1 super hub in the United Kingdom. The funds will also increase company investment in solar capacity, which they plan to increase by 50% in 2023. And the U.S. Postal Service announced it will acquire at least 66,000 battery electric delivery vehicles over the next 6 years, doubling its fleet electrification target from what it had forecast 5 months ago. The Postal Service will also look at how feasible it is to electrify its whole delivery fleet, which currently stands at 220,000 trucks. The investment will be a $9.6 billion investment and will involve purchasing vehicles from Oshkosh Defense Corps, as well as various commercial off-the-shelf vendors from the United States. Now you can find details on these stories and even more happening at FreightWaves.com and on our FreightWaves app. And if you're watching us live on our YouTube channel, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated. You can get the full FreightWaves TV experience by heading on over to tv.freightwaves.com. I'll hand this on over now to Kaylee Nix and Anthony Smith with the last check of our rest of the show.
Anthony, the very last FreightWaves Now of the year, the real FreightWaves Now. We're going to have a special holiday episode tomorrow, so don't worry about that. But it's kind of sad to see it go. 2022 was a big year for us.
It was such a big year. And we're talking about just yesterday, when you think about some of the stories that happened at the beginning of the year, you're like, wait, that was this year? Yeah, so there's going to be so much that we have to recap on in tomorrow's episode, and I'm looking forward to all of that.
Absolutely. So make sure that you stay with us tomorrow, starting live at 9 a.m. We'll have that full Christmas episode. And then we're done for the year, taking a full FreightWaves TV break between that to celebrate our Christmas holidays and our New Year, spend some time with the fam, and really just have a great time. For the rest of your day today, Dooner is already on his Christmas holiday, so there is no What the Truck, but we will have point of sale this afternoon and with Sonar today at 3:30 Eastern. We'll be back tomorrow for that special edition of FreightWaves Now. Do we have a Freightnomics tomorrow?
So we have an amazing episode that we did last week that I think everyone's going to enjoy tomorrow. And of course, we have to mark our calendars because we have so many great events lined up in the upcoming year. So if you were a fan of our virtual events in 2022 and 2021, don't worry, they're going to be in the next year as well. And we're also going to have some in person as well. So first one on tap is going to be the Sales and Marketing Summit. That's going to be coming up in January. Mark your calendars because it's going to be a great one.
Great Christmas present for somebody if you need a last minute one. Thanks for sticking with us all year, everybody. We will see you guys tomorrow to recap your 2022. Have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Welcome back to another edition of Check Call. Check Call. Check Call. Check Call.
Let's go.